John McAfee worked for NASA, created the first antivirus in history, took refuge on an island with a harem of 7 women, and led a life of vices that began to develop, like so many others, at the university at the Roanoke College of Salem, Virginia. It was the 60s, a time of hippies and experimentation. John McAfee entered the university to study mathematics and began to make numbers with a small business that consisted of the purchase and sale of certain products. Every great entrepreneur begins being a bit of a pirate, and John's case is no different. What he sold were, well, let's say, medicines that are not sold in pharmacies. Come on, what did he do? It goes without saying that John's father was a former military man who became somewhat traumatized from World War II. He ended up being an alcoholic, beating both his wife and son, and took his own life when John was only 15 years old. This event probably had something to do with the vices of young John. In 1967, he finished his degree in mathematics and began a doctorate at the University of Louisiana at Monroe. But it only lasted a year, which took him a while to be caught in female dormitories with a student and expelled from the university. Be careful. Despite his particular vices, McAfee was a smart guy, and as soon as he left the university, he was signed up to work for NASA. Specifically, he joined the Goddard Institute of Space Studies, a NASA laboratory in New York. There he worked on the Apollo project, the space mission that would take the first men to the moon. McAfee endured 2 years working at the Goddard Institute, and it was enough, since due to his vices he could not stand much in the same place. He moved to Bristol, Tennessee, where he began to work as a programmer on an evac. Here it did not last long either because, well, they caught him buying cannabis and fired him from work. From there he moved in with his wife, who, by the way, was the young woman with whom they had caught him at the University of St. Louis, Missouri. McAfee filled his curriculum with false data, which allowed him to enter to work at the Missouri Pacific Railroad, a railway company that had an IBM computer that calculated train schedules. During the first weeks, the work was going well, but during those same years the design medicines were emerging, and McAfee, like many others of the time, liked to experiment. He started working with a little bit of LSD, and one day he decided to try a line of DMT. As it did not work, he consumed the entire bag, and an hour later he was on a trip that he himself thought he had never left. He stopped understanding what people were saying to him. They talked to him, but he could not understand anything. The computer suddenly began to produce some very strange effects. That day, McAfee ended up lying next to a garbage can in the center of St. Louis and would never return to the railroad. McAfee continued to work in technology companies, constantly jumping from one to another. He also worked for Xerox, Lockheed, and Omex. Of course, he kept the old custom of working under the effects of effective substances. It was not until his divorce came when he saw himself preparing a glass of whiskey with a rage of fucking pineapple that he realized that he had hit rock bottom. Thus, John David McAfee went to therapy, and from there to Alcoholics Anonymous. It was a wise decision because after rehabilitation, well, he created a company and became a multimillionaire. In 1986, computers had already been on the market for some time, but the history of personal computers was just beginning. There was the IBM PC, which was quite popular, and the first Macintosh had already gone on sale. It was a time when, little by little, the computer was being introduced into homes. By then, McAfee worked at Lockheed, a military and aerospace technology company, and had an eye on this market. In 1986, 2 Pakistani brothers had a software store, and they were facing the fact that people were pirating their programs. That's why they created Brain, the first virus for MS-DOS. The operation of Brain was as follows. An infected disk was inserted into a computer, and then the virus began to analyze the computer. If it detected one of its programs without a license, the virus lodged in the computer, that is, in the operating system disks, and released this message. Welcome to the dungeon. Be careful with this virus. Contact us for the vaccine. And they put together the phone to call and pay for the antivirus. Creating a virus to then sell an antivirus, I think they were some visionaries in the industry. The point is that in the period of a year, the virus began to expand among the campuses of American universities, and this had become a market opportunity. John had been sober for several years after going through Alcoholics Anonymous. He was focused enough to see the feeling of the market. It was his great opportunity, so he got down to work. That same year, he founded McAfee Associates Inc. in Silicon Valley, and thereafter, according to him, he coded the antivirus in a day and a half in front of the screen. This antivirus is considered not the first antivirus in general, but the first commercial antivirus. With his company, he began to sell the antivirus and advance in its development. He sold the antivirus directly to computer companies, what we now call business to business. But more than selling or coding, McAfee was focused on selling people the idea that they need to have an antivirus, the advertising of a lifetime. In his early months, he bought a Winnebago van and labeled it as an antivirus paramedic unit. On one occasion, someone from the valley called him to treat some viruses, and after attending to him, John began to look for residues around the house, as if it were ghosts if he were a ghostbuster. At first, the word of mouth was very interesting, but the media was also important to sell a myth. A year after creating the antivirus, John appeared on the PBS NewsHour, a popular news program of the time to talk about the dangers that companies and corporations ran if they did not protect themselves against viruses. A year later, he presented his book, which was actually in part book, in part a sophisticated neuromarketing strategy elaborated exclusively to sell the antivirus. By 1990, he earned about $5 million a year, and in 1992, McAfee had some control over the market. 50 of the 100 most important companies in the United States, listed in the Fortune 100, had McAfee's antivirus or marketed their products with it. He had become a master of business to business. He was a required reference as a specialist in the treatment of computer viruses in newspapers such as the New York Times, and he was the president of the Computers Virus Industry Association. Still, there were people who believed that McAfee was lying or that it was convenient for them to say that the programmer was lying. This is the case of Ron Benveniste from the Worldwide Data Corporation, who said that McAfee exaggerated with respect to the danger of viruses and that the greatest risk that companies ran in the era of computing was in the corrupted and poorly compiled data on computers. In 1991, everyone started talking about a new virus, the Michelangelo virus, a virus that threatened with a global outage that would occur specifically on March 6, 1992. Evidently, all the media covered the news with yellowness, and McAfee was invited to various programs, interviews, and talk shows. He even said that the virus could affect up to 5 million computers around the world. According to an article in the New York Times on March 7th, a day after the attack, less than 100 computers were attacked in the United States. The most affected country was South Africa, where the virus used around 750 computers from the pharmaceutical industry. It was not the apocalypse that McAfee predicted, but many companies in developing countries learned from the bad the importance of having an antivirus. According to McAfee himself, that year, sales multiplied by 10. In October, the company debuted at NASDAQ through an IPO, and McAfee received a market capitalization valuation of $80 million. McAfee's company had a slightly strange, murky operation. According to a former employee, McAfee had a crazy corporate culture that scratched sexual harassment. Among his employees, he had 3 witches who sang songs every now and then, as well as a group of little foxes who added points if they had, let's say, carnal relationships in different parts of the office. This was published in a Showtime documentary titled Gringo: The Dangerous Life of John McAfee, and McAfee himself went out to deny these statements. Years later, McAfee would remember the times when his company went public. He said that at first it was a small company of 4 people and that he used to work taking care of the viruses himself, but that since the company began to sell shares, it had to keep up with the market and regulators, as well as managers for each thing. Basically, he complained that he had gone from dedicating himself to hunting viruses to becoming a simple accountant. In 1993, he left the company's presidency, and the following year he sold all his participation in McAfee Associates for $100 million, although years later he would say that he received more money then. The goal was to make antibiotics, or a move like Breaking Bad, whatever happened first. He also built a headquarters for the local police. The new police station was right behind his laboratory, so he had them in the palm of his hand and could have them when he needed. At one point, someone in the village fired a shot in the air in front of the house of one of McAfee's many girlfriends. Some said it was to scare some dogs, others that for an account adjustment between camels. The truth is that McAfee found out who he was, went to the man's house, and told the family with a gun in hand that if he didn't hand over the gun, he was going to kill him with bullets. But McAfee not only built a headquarters for the police, he also gave them computers allegedly punctured, weapons, and pepper spray. As the police earned very little, he paid them extra hours to patrol at night. In this way, the Carmelita police was his own private army. Or the second, because he had also hired ex-members of retired gangs and policemen as bodyguards. He claimed to be the only barrier that kept Carmelita out of organized crime, because he said that the town was an enclave of the drug trafficker. However, according to a member of the municipal council, before McAfee's arrival, in the town there were only a few drunk fights, so everything seemed paranoid to McAfee. As one of his ex-bodyguards said in an interview, on one occasion, a thief broke into McAfee's house. When McAfee discovered who the thief was, he sent his thugs to kidnap him and teach him a lesson. Apparently, he received such a beating that he returned to the town convalescent and died several days later in the hospital. On April 30th, 2012, the Belize Gang Elimination Unit broke into McAfee's property. He was arrested for illegal possession of weapons and non-certified development of medicines. The police thought McAfee was doing Walter White's, producing methamphetamine, but they only found the MDPV bathroom salts. McAfee was released with the help of the U.S. Embassy. Allison Adonisio, McAfee's biologist, had previously left the country, and beware of this, she accused McAfee of having stolen and raped her. In the United States, he tried to sue him, but since Washington has no jurisdiction over Belize, the charges did not prosper. Adonisio's witness appeared in the Showtime documentary, and McAfee responded by saying that she was crazy, that she came to work late and spent it from party to party. He also said that when he fired her, he destroyed laboratory things before going to the United States. McAfee also argued that the Showtime documentary was sensationalistic and was full of lies. He even claimed that the platform paid people to appear as witnesses. Then, McAfee moved to his house in Cayennberg Ridge. There, he had 9 dogs and a sign that said, "Be careful with the owner." John McAfee had a neighbor named Gregory Fole. He owned a bar in Florida and had 2 things in Belize, a house and a white parrot. McAfee's dogs were loose, like the parrot, and constantly the pets of both houses fought. Fole loved his white cockatoo so much that one day he threatened McAfee. If he didn't take care of his dogs, one day they would be poisoned. That day, he didn't wait. The next night, McAfee's 9 dogs were dead. The next day, when the Vice media team came to record a documentary, Gregory Fole had died. John McAfee told the team that they had to travel to Guatemala because, according to him, he had pricked the computers given to the police in Carmelita, and these had compromising information that linked the high positions of the Belizean government to the Sinaloa cartel. McAfee wanted to impose the narrative that the Belizean authorities would use Gregory Fole's assassination to incriminate him and imprison him or assassinate him, since it was not convenient for them to have someone so aware of the dirty rags and the relationship between the government and drug trafficking. In the Gringo documentary, it is understood that McAfee paid $5,000 to a hitman to kill Fole. For this, they interview a man allegedly in charge of taking the money to the hitman after the murder. After the documentary came out in 2016, 4 years after the events, McAfee got in touch with the interviewee and made him record a public apology in which the man admitted that what he said there was false and that Showtime had paid him to give false statements. But we go back to 2012. For weeks, nothing was known about McAfee until Vice News published an article in which it said that they knew where McAfee was and that they were with him. The issue is as follows. They were in the middle of the Guatemala jungle. The Vice journalist sent a photo to the editorial team and asked them to take a screenshot of the photo before uploading it. But they did not do it and uploaded the photo that today cannot be seen directly on the web. It turns out that the photos have a series of metadata among which sometimes the geolocation is found. That's why they had to upload a screenshot instead of the original photo. With that geolocation, the cartel or the paramilitary forces of Belize could find him and assassinate him. So they had to get going until they reached the capital of the country, Guatemala City, where McAfee applied for political asylum. The thing here did not end as expected because they put him in prison. One might think that you don't get out of a prison in Guatemala, but McAfee was a peculiar man. It turns out that he had a heart attack, or he faked it. It is not known exactly. They took him to the hospital and somehow managed to get him deported to the United States. And once in the United States, he said, "What the hell? He introduces me to the President of the United States." Since the antivirus guru sold the participation in 1994, things have changed a lot. The antivirus had become a bloatware, a slow program that consumes RAM memory and storage space, and that in the long run can be as tedious as a virus. That is why, once in the United States, McAfee uploaded a video that went viral, in which he is seen smoking cigars and smelling bath salts accompanied by women in company. In the video, he invites to uninstall the antivirus. Also appears Janice Dyson, McAfee's last wife, who worked as a woman in company until meeting the programmer. In 2016, McAfee wanted to be president of the United States of America with the Libertarian Party, a party that, throughout its history, has obtained from hard penalties one or another representative for the state senates of Wyoming, Alaska, and Arkansas, and that, in its best presidential result, barely obtained 3.3% of the popular vote. It is a party that many qualify as controversial, where discussions are made about tax payment or possession of weapons, among others. A party where it seems to emphatically reject the need to have a driving license to drive a car. In short, it was a party that made a match with McAfee, so he ran for president and attended the debates. In the National Convention of the Libertarian Party of 2016, the candidate would finally be elected. Although many believed that McAfee was the favorite, he was third. He obtained 131 delegates, which represented 14.16% of the votes. In 2020, McAfee would try again to win the primaries of the Libertarian Party. But the truth is that he had other, more important things to focus on. The interest in less state, less taxes, and more privacy led McAfee to the inevitable path of Bitcoin. McAfee used his previous fame to be seen as an expert in cybersecurity, which promoted decentralization and privacy of cryptocurrencies in podcasts and media related to the crypto market. The problem is that he not only promoted the use of privacy cryptocurrencies such as Monero or Zcash, but rather promoted any crypto project that he paid for. In 2018, McAfee invited his followers on Twitter to invest in at least 11 cryptocurrencies. Elon Musk would do the same years later with Dogecoin. But, according to YouTuber Kofasilla, Musk can cover his back by saying that he extended Doge's FOMO as a meme. And that's why he hasn't had any legal problems so far. Meanwhile, McAfee was being paid by the owners of these cryptocurrencies companies, which turned his shares into, allegedly, a pump and dump. A very popular fraudulent scheme in the stock market and the crypto world, which consists of promoting the purchase of a value, share, or cryptocurrency so that it rises in price abruptly, and once it has risen, sell the assets at the highest price. Something similar to what Jordan Belfort did, the character of the Wolf of Wall Street. Here, McAfee was already getting into trouble with the North American authorities, and of course with Hacienda. On January 3, 2019, he would tweet something that would put him even more in the spotlight. "Here I am." He practically admitted not having paid taxes since he lived in Belize. This happens because American citizens must pay taxes even if they live abroad. The problem is that later American justice would process him as a tax evader, not for the money he had already earned, but for the money he earned from 2014 to 2018. Throughout his life, McAfee had managed to evade justice on numerous occasions. But we are all Hacienda, and in the United States, it is no different. Not for nothing, Benjamin Franklin, one of the founding fathers, once said that the only inevitable thing in life is death and taxes. By publicly admitting it, McAfee went too far. In the documentary Running with the Devil, the guru flees arguing that the Sinaloa cartel wanted to kill him. But it was rather the federal government of the United States who would start looking for him, not with persecutions to the action movie, but rather with boring bureaucratic procedures in the courts of the state of Tennessee, where McAfee was patronized. As in 2008, in 2019, he began to sell his properties. He also withdrew a lot of money in cash from the banks and went on a yacht that he claimed to have bought from Jordan Belfort himself, the Wall Street Wolf. On the yacht went a cameraman, a bodyguard, and his wife, Janice. McAfee made a tour of the Caribbean. The first stop was in Bahamas, where he had problems carrying weapons. The same happened to him in the Dominican Republic, where he was imprisoned for a few days until he finally got out without charges. He was also allegedly in Cuba and Venezuela. While he was in Cuba, he gave an ultimatum through Twitter. I have collected files on corruption in governments. For the first time, I will give names and details. I will start with a corrupt CIA agent and 2 Bahamian officials. From today, if they arrest me or I disappear, more than 31 terabytes of incriminating data will be delivered to the press. Until now, everything seemed like McAfee's typical persecutory mania. Although the justice system began to process his case for tax evasion, there was no official search. And every time he had clashes when entering with weapons illegally in a country, he was imprisoned for a few days and released again. On November 30th of that same year, he would tweet, I have been receiving subtle messages from U.S. officials who say, indeed, we are coming for you, McAfee. We are going to fuck you. Today, he gives me a tattoo just in case. If he fucked me, it wasn't me, it's a montage. Look at my right arm. The word whacked can be used colloquially with the meaning of, but the important thing is that whacked was also the cryptocurrency that McAfee himself had created, referring to the conspiracy of the murder of Jeffrey Epstein. On October 5, 2020, John McAfee was arrested at the Barcelona airport when his search warrant had already been activated. 10 days later, he tweeted the following, I'm happy here, I have friends, the food is good, everything is fine. Know that if he fucked me like Epstein, it won't be my fault. On June 23, 2021, after 9 months at the Brians II Penitentiary Complex in San Esteve, Cés Rovires, the Spanish government expelled him. McAfee could talk to his wife about what would happen now in the United States. According to the New York Times, a hypothetical prison sentence for McAfee would be 5 years, 1 for each year he did not pay taxes. A few hours later, whacked his cell, and the media shared the news. John McAfee had taken his life. Both the autopsy and the lawyer also claimed that McAfee had taken his life. After his death, McAfee's Instagram account posted an image that only contained a Q, possibly referring to QAnon. The photo was deleted. Janice, McAfee's wife, was not so convinced that John had taken his life. She claimed that in the call they had had after the extradition order, it did not sound like an insult. In addition, she claimed that the Spanish authorities had not allowed her to see McAfee's body. And this is where the conspiracy theories begin. Just 1 day after the news of McAfee's death, the whacked token, which he had created himself, was shot at 2,000%. And of course, here some theories begin, such as that McAfee would have faked his death and fled the prison being even richer thanks to the whacked token. The truth is that it would not be the first time that he would escape from a prison, although fleeing a Spanish prison today seems quite unreal. Other theories say that McAfee would have published the 31 terabytes of compromising data in the form of NFT, but 2 years have passed and no one has any idea of that information. In the end, we are faced with a very extravagant story, where myth and reality merge, and we do not know exactly where the line is. A story of adventures and mysteries.